Welcome. I hope we're on the air now. This is Mark Kastel. I'm the director of Organic Eye. Organic Eye is based in Washington, D.C., and it is the investigative arm of Beyond Pesticides. Organic Eye just celebrated its first birthday. I've been involved in watchdogging the organic industry for 16 years and involved since the commercialization in the 1980s. Beyond Pesticides has been an advocate for organics as a more sane and safe way to produce our food and steward the earth for almost 40 years now. So I am joined today by my partner in running Beyond Pesticides on our management team, Jay Feldman, who is the executive director of Beyond Pesticides. Say hello, Jay.
Hi, everyone.
Okay, yeah. But to get the camera on you, you have to actually say something. Don't just wave next time.
Yeah, I said hi.
Okay, you did. Okay. So I'm just going to say this is a live broadcast recapping the National Organic Standards Board meeting this week. It should have happened live in Iowa. It happened virtually due to the disaster we're all bit players in. The National Organic Standards Board is a 15-member diverse stakeholder panel appointed by the USDA secretary to advise the department on implementing the law, and it has control of the list of approved substances. So you can't use anything in organics that isn't organically produced without the blessing of the NOSB and then the adoption by the USDA. So there's a high threshold. So that's part of what we're doing this week, is reviewing options for what is safe and permissible to be used in organics. So I want to talk about a couple things that happened today. They passed a resolution that basically constrains the availability of fish products for use as fertilizers and potentially animal feeds. I think there was an overlap in two committees. So you can't just go out and fish for that purpose. It has to be waste as a byproduct for human consumption, or fish that were inadvertently caught in commercial fishing, or invasive species is another example that would qualify. And it tightens up the rules right now to try to preserve the fisheries out there, which are under threat from both overfishing and climate change and other environmental problems. I want to talk about the use of, quote, paper pots. So seedlings go in a pot. There's a mechanical way that they can be put into the ground. The question is, what are these paper pots made out of? So I want to talk a little bit about that and about what they call bio-based, biodegradable mulch. Make no mistake about it, this is plastic mulch. They don't want to use the, quote, P word, because the P word is objectionable to most of us in use in agriculture. So these are materials that are a combination of maybe soy-based oil and other synthetics. And so, Jay, do you want to talk about either of those issues just a little bit, or I'll chime in? But, you know, we operate under the precautionary principle at Organic Eye and Beyond Pesticides until we're sure something's safe. We don't want to put it in the ground to potentially be uptaken by the plants, and we don't want to affect the life, the microbiome in the soil, which is should be the basis of organic production. So, Jay, do you want to say a word or two about those two issues?
Yeah, I think they're symptomatic of our challenges with organic. You know, we all believe deeply in organic as the way to move into the future and protect ourselves, you know, protect the planet from these existential crises that we're on the brink of. Unless we can get organic right, I think we tend to shy away from the huge impact that we can have. And to the extent that we degrade people's trust in the label, then we don't build organic as the sector it needs to be. We don't want to be a niche sector, right? Mark? We want to be mainstream agriculture.
Well,
We want
organic should be what we call conventional. It should be the standard.
That's
You
right.
know, I remember a quote by Jane Goodall saying something like, you know, who would have ever thought that we would pour poison on the earth in order to produce food?
Right. Exactly. And that's what the chemical intensive agriculture is all about. So,
So
you know,
so
so today, you know, as we go to NOSB meetings, right, it seems sort of wonky because we're talking about materials, we're talking about technologies, and we're supposed to be evaluating these things as to determine whether they meet the standard. And the standards really are based on principles and values. You know, do we pollute the earth when we produce these things? Do we hurt the microbiota in the soil? Do we impact workers? Do we impact farmers? What are we doing when we make a decision on an allowed material? And then how are we affecting the system of agriculture? You know, is it supporting an industrial form of agriculture or small farmers or family farmers?
well,
And I think
let's
paper pots is an example of that. The challenge is paper pots facilitate small farming, right?
there you go.
It's a
Right.
technology that serves the small farmer. And so you want to embrace that technology. You embrace that technology, but all of a sudden you realize that technology embedded in it is this reliance on virgin paper. Well, we as a community don't want to see virgin paper as a material that is integral to organic farming. Why? Because it has devastating environmental impacts in terms of forestry. I mean, so we need to define what we're talking about when we talk about the paper. Obviously, there's what I heard today was, and I guess this is borne out by some of the research that's gone on, that because of the fibers and the strength of the fibers that are needed in the paper pot, recycled paper just doesn't meet the standard that's needed. So it is a challenge, and this is not unique to paper pots. This is something we face all the time. So, Mark, you're going to tell me I'm getting wonky, but it's really important that we look at every decision in the context of whether we are incentivizing the values, moving to the values and the principles that we hold dear in organic.
Well, Jay, you're our chief wonky officer.
Yeah, right.
But I also want to invite or introduce our chief scientific officer, Terry Shistar. Dr. Shistar's on the line. Terry, unmute yourself, first of all. You have to hit that microphone button. I see you're muted. And now just say hello. We're talking about paper pots. Terry, besides for the fact that they can't make them out of recycled content, which is the paper that's approved for organics right now, isn't there a synthetic component to these paper pots, i.e. plastic in there too?
Yeah, of course, paper is a synthetic material, but one of the things we learned from the technical review that was done on newspaper a couple of years ago was that the recycled paper that's now used, newspaper and other paper, has a lot of what we really think of as synthetic, like plastic polymers that are added to it. I guess that's what makes your toilet paper strong and soft or something.
Well, it first of all, technically, paper, it starts as a biological product from trees, but you're saying it's synthetic based on the harsh chemicals and the processes that go into producing it. Is that correct, Terry?
Yeah. And you only have to look at what goes downstream of a paper production plant to know,
yeah,
there's a lot of harsh chemicals being used.
Yeah,
So,
we have plenty of paper plants here in Wisconsin, and they cause untold amounts of pollution. Yes, Jay.
So to put this in the context of how do you move organic along and support farmers, small farmers? Here's a great example: paper pots. So it's an interesting technology. It's an important technology, and we want to be supportive of it. But we have very serious questions about the paper. And at the same time, we want to incentivize the ingenuity of the marketplace to develop a product that's in compliance with the values and principles of organic. That's what we want to do. And what pains me about the process here is once you get something on the national list, it's very difficult to get it off the list. We used to, until, what was it, 2013, we had a system on the NOSB where everything sunsetted off the list, and you had to relist it based on a supermajority that required a real serious rethinking of that material. But that wasn't the extent of it, really. The purpose of it was not only to force a comprehensive review of the science and the availability of alternatives and to look at questions of essentiality. The real purpose, as I saw that sunset clause, was to incentivize the market to come in with alternative materials. So you could put something like paper pots on the market and say, we're giving you a 5-year sunset, and our expectation is that you're going to come up with new technology that meets the values, the real, the continuous improvement, the values that we hold dear in organic.
It wasn't, Jay, it wasn't just the fact that the sunset was really a sunset, but that there was also annotation allowed at sunset.
Yeah.
So
Mark and I were talking about that earlier.
Oh, so it could be that continuous improvement happening during the sunset process.
Right.
So let me.
But I want to, before you go on, I want to say that if I were on the board, I would demand that all these issues that are coming up, and there are a lot of them, they came up over the last day alone, whether it's whether you're discussing degradable mulch, or you're discussing inert ingredients, or whatever you're discussing, you can put a sunset. You can, and this is an annotation, I guess, Terry, you would say, right? But
an expiration date?
An expiration date.
Well, let me interject by telling everybody who's watching that Congress created something called a sunset, that part of the law itself said that if you put a synthetic or a non-organic ingredient, it can only be on there for 5 years. Then you have to check it for safety again and see if somebody has developed an organic alternative and then take it off the darn list. But the USDA unilaterally changed that. And so nothing comes off the list. We sued them, and then they had to go to Congress to make it legal after the fact. So now I say we live in the land of the midnight sun. The sun never sets. Yeah. Now it takes a supermajority to take something off the list.
We have to get creative.
So we have to get
this is where we have to bring creativity to these decisions so that board members force expiration dates, like Terry just said. You put an expiration. Now, if they can't use annotations, that would technically be an annotation, meaning a statement like an ingredient statement on a cleaning product where it says, keep this away from children, or don't spray into the air, or have a well-ventilated room when you use this product. In the organic realm, that's called an annotation. It's an instruction on how this product is to be used. It establishes limitations on its use.
Right. You can only use that, even if it's on the list. You can only use it if you use it according to the annotation.
That's right.
The restriction.
Right. And that's why, this goes hand in glove with a good certification and inspection process, because, basically we're operating on the honor system for the most part in agriculture. Organic agriculture has a much higher standard and a duty regarding record keeping and enforcement and so forth. Even though we have problems and we're trying to correct those problems, we have a situation where there are inspectors out there and there's record keeping that we don't see in chemical intensive or conventional agriculture. And so when we put an annotation on a product that's allowed in organic, our expectation is it's just not something that is out there, it's something that is monitored. It's something that creates an enforcement mechanism to ensure compliance. And that's the importance of organic, to use those tools to continually improve the system so that we ultimately get to where we want to go.
Okay, so Jay, I want to move on to two last issues here. So just a minor segue. First of all, I'll quote Jim Hightower, former agricultural commissioner from Texas. I think he once wrote a book entitled, "If God had intended us to vote, he would have given us candidates." And so if Congress had intended the NOSB to work properly, the secretaries would have appointed real honest to goodness, organic in their heart board members. But the board is now, I will say pretty succinctly, stacked in favor of large commercial interests with individuals that have very intimate relationships and membership in the Organic Trade Association, the lobby group that represents business interests. So today, because they were thinking about putting these pots in that might have non-recycled material, but also might have synthetic content, they decided, somebody used the logic, well, we should be able to use this biodegradable plastic mulch. And even though we don't know what chemicals will go in the soil from the pots or the mulch, we should be able to use those because look, we're going to use them on the paper pots and we're going to let them do it. Maybe we should let the mulch do it. So neither of those are passed yet. And
Right.
We're fighting those. We're not against them in principle. We're against them without knowing, according to the precautionary principle, what they might add to the soil and what danger that might present to the organic community. But let's shift to Terry for a second. Terry, do you want to add any thoughts on this vote that went, in our opinion, the wrong way on these list 4 inerts, list 4 as designated by the Environmental Protection Agency, something they used to, this list is outdated. They used to maintain a list of, quote, safer inert ingredients, which, as Jay said yesterday, make up the majority of pesticides. So we could have the active ingredient be something very safe, botanically based, like pyrethrum. But we don't know, it's a secret what these other ingredients are. And Jay was leading the charge on the board for the 5 years he served on the National Organic Standards Board to get these materials scrutinized, and they just refused to take the tough vote. And so, Terry, do you want to speak to that briefly, please?
Well, we've had some pretty tough votes on inerts. I think that the vote in 2015 kind of set the stage for the vote today. On the surface of it, it looked like that the proposal in 2015 set up a process, but it was so poorly worded that nobody could agree what it actually said. People said, some people said that it meant that the inerts that could be used are things that have already been approved for you that are on the safer chemical list. Other people said there was going to be another list. And, and everybody has been saying what it means based on what they want it to mean, including us. I mean, we've described how we think that vote that was in 2015 should be used to move forward. And it does describe a way of going forward. And we've described in great detail.
And when you say, Terry, when you say go forward, you mean go forward to review all these materials?
To review all the inerts.
Yeah.
So
right now, they've never been reviewed by the National Organic Standards Board, right?
Right. And, if it wasn't for our mistake, they wouldn't even know what was on the list.
So just to review, they had in front of them a sunset vote. They could have voted to remove these materials. It would have forced the USDA to address this need to scrutinize materials and then put some safe materials back on the list after review. But instead, the majority of the board was the same board members who voted in favor of these tougher requirements for review were the same folks that said, no, hydroponics not illegal. There's some really high integrity people on this board, but the rest of them basically punted this down the lane and then passed a toothless in terms of having no power to force the USDA to do anything, a resolution so everybody feels good. Now we did something, and now we can go home and not worry about this issue for another 5 years. Terry?
So as you say, that yeah, the resolution was toothless. It basically said that we would have taken these things off the list if we thought that nobody would get mad at us if we did it. You know?
Yeah, so you know what first of all, something that I find really objectionable is these certifiers come in and act as lobbyists. So we have this conflict of interest. Farmers pay the certifiers. Certifiers decide what they can use, and then they try to influence the rulemaking. I don't mind that the certifiers come in and say, we have 30 people who use this material, and if you take it off the list, they'll be impacted. That's a point of fact, but they're coming in and lobbying on this plastic mulch that has synthetics in it, et cetera. So
well, with regard to inerts, it's kind of, you have the people who wrote that 2015 recommendation by the board, who were then, you know, doing last minute lobbying of board members, trying to convince them that they shouldn't take the inerts off the list because that 2015 recommendation couldn't be implemented. And that's part of what I meant when I said in passing that 2015 recommendation, they set up this vote today.
Yes. So it looked to me, you tell me if you concur, Terry, but when they first brought this up for discussion on Wednesday and it was controversial, they decided to postpone the vote until today. It looked like this had the votes to pass. And then this heavy duty lobbying came in from, you're saying board members, but they were acknowledging
well,
that they
really
were
board members, people, I don't know, Zia and Emily Brown Rosen were both mentioned.
Okay, so yeah, so they mentioned people outside of the board who had a particular POV on this. They at least one of them is very involved in the Organic Trade Association and the largest certifier in the country, CCOF in California. I should also say that on a lot of these issues, there was a stark difference in the board, not only between the family farm oriented and independent voices and the Organic Trade Association members and active folks, but also in scale. So as an example, on the plastic mulch that was being discussed, one of the board members who holds a farmer's seat said, she said, I never use plastic mulch. And so it's not necessarily essential unless you're a giant industrial grower with hundreds or thousands of acres and really a conventional farm, and you want to use this because you don't want to use organic mulches, or she suggested living mulches, or another board member actually did. We don't have to use these plastics. We can grow without them, but we can't maybe grow in an industrial manner. So that's where these tools, these inerts come in, and we see a lot of lobbying. When I was farming organically, I rarely sprayed anything because I used practices that tried to grow a healthier plant that just wasn't susceptible. But Terry, any closing comments on inerts?
You don't have time for my closing comment.
Okay, because we're going to try to end this pretty quickly. Jay, I'll give you a chance for any quick closing comments, and then I'll turn it one more time over to Terry. And then I want to encourage anyone who's watching this broadcast today, which is recorded on Friday, to watch our longer recap that occurred yesterday. It's archived on our website and our Facebook page. And hopefully without spending for transportation and getting to the NOSB meeting, you'll have a little flavor. So Jay, any last words here and closing our meeting?
The vote today on inerts really shows how important it is to have a real sunset process that enables the board to, by supermajority, maintain a listing. The vote that they took today would have, under the originally envisioned sunset process. Everybody knows what sunset means. It means something comes off and you have to reinstate it. Had that vote been taken under the old and the real meaning of the word sunset, those inerts would be coming off the list, or at least the process would have been started to begin to take the materials off the list. So that's important. You know, we really need to be considering how we go back to Congress and really ensure that this organic label is held to the level of scrutiny which was envisioned when the law was first passed by Congress, by all the stakeholders that got together. And, you know, I know it sounds wonky, but the whole sunset process is critical to that. The other element here that has been weaving through all the decisions over the last 3 days has been this sort of stakeholder articulation that my farmers need this, or my certifiers need this, or whatever. And everything else be damned, you know, the standards of the statute be damned, you know, the viability of alternatives.
Well, Jay, they weren't saying that. You're interpreting that, which I'm not going to dispute. But they were saying, well, somebody's using it, meaning a farmer or a processor. So we need to leave this on the list.
My interpretation of what was going on, and it was really a slap in the face to those of us that have really struggled with working on behalf of our constituencies, at the same time bringing the standards of the law into play as a basis of protecting integrity. You can't just walk into an NOSB meeting and say, I'm representing a group here, and I'm going to do whatever that group tells me I should do. Part of your job is, as a stakeholder, is to have an informed discussion with stakeholders and move the community in the direction.
One of the saddest things I observed is Sue Baird, who I believe, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, is on the board representing the quote public interest in consumers. She's a consultant to the industry, and she argues and lobbies on behalf of, you know, for instance, the synthetic parasiticide vote. She was one of 2 people that passionately argued that we need to have the, no matter, as you're saying.
She was the one.
Oh, the only one. Okay. So even though there were measurable residues of this drug that could be found in, would be found in quote organic eggs if it was approved, her farmers that she works with wanted to use it. So Jay, you're saying that.
Mark, this is why Organic Eye and this collaboration we have with Beyond Pesticide is so critical, because there are people in the manufacturing industry, handlers, there are growers that agree with what we're saying, that understand the complexities of these debates, that understands that the bottom falls out of organic unless the marketplace views it with integrity. And so we're forced into this debate, this sort of black and white debate between bad industry and, you know, good people. Well, the reality is we have a lot of people in industry per se who have values, share our values, work with farmers, share farmer values, and understand the importance of protecting integrity.
Jay, there are pragmatic business people who understand that there is a higher authority than the USDA, even a higher authority than the federal courts when we've sued the USDA, and that's the consumer. They're the final arbiter. So if we don't respect their need for integrity in the organic process, if they lose confidence, everybody loses, big, small, farmer, manufacturer. So let me turn this over to Terry for any closing comments, Terry, on the meeting this week. Any observations that you want to close with?
I don't know. You guys have been hitting all the high points, but I think one of the things that I noticed was that there's a real difference in where people are getting their information. And even some of the people that I didn't expect to be voting the way I wanted them to did. And it seemed like it was because they went out of their way to get good information. And they, and they weren't just parroting something that somebody had told them. On the other hand, you had people who were just parroting misinformation. That was really obvious.
Sounds like politics today, Terry. Sounds like everything I read in the newspaper.
Well, not quite that bad. It can't get that bad.
Well, let me close by saying thank you all for tuning in. These will be archived, so if you want to share them, you can first of all like our Facebook page. That helps us get the word out. You can share this on your Facebook pages if you're on Facebook, or you can get this on YouTube or our website. We appreciate your support at Organic Eye. We're one of the few organic industry watchdogs that are willing to do this hard work and actually name names, corporate names, individual names. Everyone else wants to get along at the expense of the meaning, the true working meaning of organics, which we, the three of us, will not back down on. And then I want to encourage you to visit Beyond Pesticides website. There are a lot of tools and resources there to not only do we want to live a healthier life by not consuming toxins, but anything you put on your skin absorbs into your bloodstream. Anything we spray in our house, on our lawns, on our school yards, on our playgrounds, get in our children's bloodstream, our pets' bloodstreams. And Beyond Pesticides has a great resource you can spend some time with. So thank you, Jay. Thank you, Terry. And thank you all for caring enough about organics to join us today. Bye-bye.
Onward.